Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Fern Hume, and my good mates Louise Hodgkinson, Marina Hauer and Marisa Sloper. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. So just to give a bit of background, this started with our Women on the Trail talk we gave at the TRF stand at last year's Adventure Bike Rider Festival. A lot of people found it interesting. It wasn't focused just for women. It was aimed at all riders, just to highlight some of the issues that we face as women. Lots of people found it interesting, and Clive thought that it would be fun for us to stage a takeover. So this is us taking over.
So I'm Louise Hodgkinson. I'm from Sweet Lamb Ladies, one of the instructors there. Over the last 5 years, we've built up this wonderful training school for ladies, and it's just really getting everybody out there in a way that they're really enjoying it. And so I'm very pleased to be part of this. Thanks for having me.
Hi, I'm Marisa. Thanks for having us. I work for Bennett's. I've been riding a number of years and I love trail riding. So I'm really delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on board.
Hi everyone, I'm Marina. I am one of the members of the committee on South Wales TRF in the mythical land where everybody actually comes to us to ride trails. Love to get involved.
I'm Fern. I live in Cambridgeshire. I'm helping out the TRF with a women's project. I'm a group officer for Cambridgeshire and obviously love trail riding. The TRF is the Trail Riders Fellowship, so it's an organisation of 10,000 members now in England and Wales. The purpose of the Trail Riders Fellowship is to help support and organise to keep the trails open. Each pretty much county has a regional group that you can join. It's a brilliant way of getting out and finding other people to ride with and to develop your skills of riding and just having a brilliant load of fun.
I think the local groups are a great way of actually getting riding buddies in your area, and someone will always be good at nav, someone else is good at mechanics, and it's finding the right set within your group, and you can join other groups as well, which is brilliant.
Within the TRF, within our 10,000 members, one of the things we are trying to promote is to promote people from different backgrounds into trail riding, because this is a fantastic hobby that so many people can benefit from, regardless of where they come from, how long their legs are, their level of skill and confidence. So we are actively trying to promote women into trail riding, but also people from all sorts of background. To do that, we have formed a bit of a national steering group. And the aim of all of that is really to introduce trail riding to as many people as possible, to safeguard the future of trail riding, but also to be a bit more publicly visible, because not everybody who gets into motorcycling realizes that there is trail riding and that it's actually really easy to get into if only you know how.
One of the questions I'd like to ask you all is, when did we pass our bike tests?
Back when I didn't have grey hair was when I passed my bike test. I've been riding 20 years, 2004. How about you, Louise?
Well, I was similar. I was 2005, but obviously I'm a bit older than everybody else. I'm coming in at 56 nearly. And so I didn't start my bike test till I was 30. I didn't take my bike test till I was 35. So having to learn a new skill at 35 and take a theory test and everything else was quite a challenge. And I'm not a natural biker. I wasn't born to be on a bike. And so I've had to learn the techniques to ride rather than just sort of give it some and go, because that just freaks me out. What about you, Marina? How long have you been riding?
I started at a similar place as you did, because it was the lockdown and everybody was terribly bored, and I decided I was just going to have my midlife crisis early and take my test. And I passed in 2021, so it's been relatively recent for me, but I've just fallen head over heels, completely in it now.
Obsessed. Like, I think we're all obsessed, aren't we?
In a, I will never have any money ever again, but at least I have lots of fun kind of way.
So you can't buy happiness, but you can buy an off-road motorbike.
I passed my full bike licence in 2011. I wanted to get straight into overlanding, having read Ted Simon and watched Charlie Borman and Ewan McGregor, then discovered a book by Lois Price and watched Mondo Enduro with Austin Vince. I was always told that a GS would be way too big, but that's the only way to get into adventure motorcycling, and discovered it was far too expensive for me. And I thought that going around the world with a backup crew and having to take a big burly man with me to protect me would be the only way. But having read Lois Price, I thought, I'm going to buy myself a little trail bike. 2011 was the year, straight off to Norway. I've had lots of different bikes and ridden lots. I've been very privileged to ride lots of different bikes. But my bread and butter bike that I only ride is my DRZ 400. And I rode that to Nepal overland, then rode it around New Zealand, and then shipped it back in a very sorry state of a box of parts to Harwich. That is my regular trail bike, my regular commute bike. It is my everything bike.
You're rebuilding it yourself?
I rebuilt it myself. It's running now. I took it out on the TEP in France in September. A lot of the questions in our online women's groups and on quite a few of the groups is, I'm a woman, my legs aren't long enough. Like, what bike can I have? Because I find bikes too tall. I have lowered mine. I've lowered the seat. But I say to people, it's not always, you'll touch on this later with bike skills. With smaller trail bikes, you're shunting your bum over on a very skinny seat with a small trail bike to get 1 foot on the floor, whereas a regular bike you might have done your CBT or your direct access on, you're planting both feet on the floor and you're looking for that confidence to get both feet flat on the floor, whereas trail riding, we have to try and get into that mindset. And it's not just the seat height, it's the seat width. And there are many ways to adapt a bike. But I do think the bike market is very difficult for us because a lot of adventure bikes and trail bikes are sky high. And it's not just an issue for women, it's an issue for anyone who's vertically challenged or has short legs.
I had a chap who came up to speak to us when we were at ABR doing our chat last year, and he asked me what bikes I could suggest. As you ladies know, I'm pretty diminutive at 5'1", and this chap had 26-inch inside legs.
What bikes do you ride, Marisa?
I've got a couple of road bikes, my off-road or my trail bikes. I have a Beta Alp 200 and a KTM Freeride 350, which I'm looking forward to trying out with Louise this year.
Louise, what do you like to ride, or what do you ride?
I'm like Marina, and I ride a bigger bike. So I ride the KTM. I've got a KTM 790 Adventure R, so it's a 2020 version. But what that enables us to do is to do the trails once you've then got the technique to ride the bigger bike, but to do the trails, but then also things like if you then suddenly need to hit the motorway. We were on a trail today and we did sort of 70 miles of trail, but then we then hit the motorway for an hour to come back. And you can do it without having the Beta Alp num bum. So it gives you that further range. So I really enjoy my KTM 790.
I'm very envious of that because that's the challenge I've got, as you ladies know, is I'm trying to get to that point where I can ride a further distance to the trails and then the trails, which at the moment my little bikes don't quite cut the mustard on.
Trying to find that unicorn bike, or you do the little bikes with the van, or very local routes, or the bigger bike, but you trade off some of the gnarliest of the trails.
I also was told that in order to do this adventure riding, which is the thing I saw on YouTube, that one would probably want to have a GS. So I bought a GS. I started taking that on the trails. My local TRF group, I still remember, said that I was brave. At the time, I didn't know what that meant, but I kind of cracked on with it anyway. I am now on a somewhat more sensible 890 Adventure R, which really is I love it so much. I don't think I'll get rid of it ever. Every time I try a little bike, there's lots of people lending me small bikes, trying to entice me into the enduro space because, Marina, then you could do crazier things and you could come with us on all these trails and you could go out when it's really sloppy and wet. And every time I ride a little bike, I think I'd much rather be on the 890 because there is something about the momentum and the stability that a big bike brings you where, yes, you have to do the training. And I've been to Sweet Lamb a couple of times, learned some skills. Because there is a lot of weight that you're carrying around. There's a lot of falling over that you can be doing, and I do. There's a lot of things you can break, including yourself, if you're riding a bigger bike. Since I was blessed with the 32-inch inseam, height is not an issue, and I'm just for once actually making the most of it. What's coming on the market at the moment in the small to medium capacity adventure bike space is really exciting, so I'm looking forward to trying some other stuff.
I think it's also about what adventures you want to go on. I recently took a group of ladies out to Morocco, and I've done all the trails, or virtually all the trails that we've done, I've done on my 790. We then repeated them on a KTM 450. Wow. and also we could then hit the dunes, which I'm not skilled enough to hit the dunes on a 790 with luggage on, but you can on a 450.
That trip looked so much fun.
I would like to share with you later how good the trip was for having women that came in at no level 3 years ago to being able to hit the dunes on a 450.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I'm Austin Vince, and in 1995, me and some buddies set out to motorcycle around the world on a trip we called Mondo Enduro. We thought it would be terribly difficult, but it turned out it wasn't. Ultimately, we were the first group to trail ride across Siberia's Zilov Gap, and then also the first crew to ride the Road of Bones to Magadan. And we did it on secondhand 350cc trail bikes without the internet, mobile phones, or GPS. Motorcycling around the world was the defining experience of my life, and I knew I wanted to share that fun. So now I teach the DIY lo-fi Mondo ethos by taking people on miniature expeditions in the Spanish Pyrenees. If you think that sounds like fun, you'd be right. So come on.
You can find lots more information at austinvince.com.
Why have we chosen off-road?
Or as in the TRF, we technically have to specify it is off tarmac for most of it in the UK because we are technically riding on legal roads.
One of the reasons I chose to get into trail riding was before I went on my big overland trip. I joined the TRF to get some experience of riding on rougher surfaces because I knew as I travelled east and out of Europe, the road surfaces would get rougher. Little did I know that I got pretty much all the way to Nepal and 98% of it was tarmac. But when I did hit sections like in Turkmenistan where the motorway just turned into thick sand and we had to ride at night, which the golden rule is when you're overlanding you should never ride at night. But after 5 kilometres of me going, I kind of got the hang of it. And a few other sections of very rough gravel in the Stans. My fear was overcome, so by the time I got to Nepal, where the roads were quite rough, I felt more confident. And then in New Zealand, a lot of the B roads are chunky gravel, but it's still very embarrassing being overtaken by guys on sports bikes over there when you're on a dual sport because they've grown up with it. When I went to road events with my dad, there was just not a lot of representation. I didn't see women doing trail riding, so I never knew that it was a genre or a subcategory. But had I seen that, I think I would have absolutely lapped it up because I'm a huge lover of mountains, the outdoors, travel, navigation. I've always been into going into national parks. Trail riding in the UK is a great combination of all of those, getting out into nature, getting fresh air. It was just a marriage made in heaven of motorcycling and all of those facets.
I think a lot of the ladies come for training with me at Sweet Lamb. I mean, I've got one lovely lady, Corinne, and she's like, well, I just want to go and see really pretty things in places that I really don't want to walk to. And when you've got someone who's come up the gravel driveway into the farm, holding onto a bike like this, so scared, so thing, and then by by the afternoon, you've got them at the top of a mountain and they've got this used to this movement of the bike underneath them. And there is such an exhilaration. And for me, your question was, why do we ride? It's the joy of going to these places and being there and seeing stuff that not everybody's going to see.
I kind of had the same thing, but for me, it was the added, I've always enjoyed driving and I've always enjoyed sort of doing more unconventional sporty things, if you like. When you're in a car, when you're with a group of people, chances are as a woman, you don't drive. It's always somebody else who does the driving. So you are being taken to these wonderful places. Now here suddenly, if I got to the top of the mountain, it was me that got myself to the top of the mountain. And actually, there is such a joy in that, just from a personal achievement point of view, but then also from a haha, told you kind of, you can't quite turn that off all the time.
I still love the shock of when you've done something really gnarly and you've got to the top, or you've been through, or you're in the middle of absolutely nowhere. You're in the middle of a Moroccan riverbed and suddenly there's a goat herder there and you sort of stop and you take your lid off and he's like, oh my goodness, you're a woman. And it's just sort of, there is like, yeah.
I'm loving listening to your tales. I rode horses as a kid. And I loved that, like you said, that sense of adventure, exploration, going down the trails and all the bridleways. I've always been into exploring and in nature and that out in the fresh air. And I wanted, the trail riding just gives me that excitement of being able to go off and do more of it, go further, go farther. As you say, getting to that, that sense of accomplishment because it's under your skill, your technique, not a horse's four legs.
And I've also found when I put my sports watch on, my smartwatch, I burn more calories off than when I'm in the gym some days. When I've done a whole good spring, summer of a lot of trail riding, when I go and see the physio or go for a massage, I always get comments about how muscly my neck and shoulders are. My back feels stronger. And I feel so much better in myself. I'd rather be out trail riding than sat in a sweaty gym surrounded by people looking at screens. It's just so much better for your mental health, your physical health, and then the social side of it. I was up at Motor Junkies between Christmas and New Year and it's freezing cold, but I was warm from the exertion because I was quite unfit after the Christmas break. And I did find the muddiest part of Bomber Lane and managed to crash headfirst into the deepest part of the mud. I mean, my friends call me Labrador for a reason because I was head to toe in mud. But just the pure joy and hysterics of everybody laughing at the state I got myself into. There is just something hysterically funny about the group dynamics of the mishaps you have.
And I think in terms of the, call it mental health benefits, if you like, but just that clarity that you get from riding where you can't really focus on anything that isn't right in front of you, because if you think about what happened yesterday, you're going to fall off. If you think about what's going to happen tomorrow, you're probably going to fall off as well. In the TRF, we did a survey last year to try and quantify the benefits of riding in general, but of trail riding in particular. And I think the results said something like 99% of people who ride trails agree that it is good for them mentally. And this is across all ages, and it doesn't matter what your background is and whether you work, as a roofer or in an office. I think this is it's just really good for you on so many levels. I mean, yeah, I've said it before, you break stuff and it's expensive and you're going to get achy and you're going to get tired. But I never feel like it was not worth getting out, even if it was really cold and really wet and muddy and sometimes quite tough.
Who do we ride with, like clubs or groups?
I, for years, had been the only woman riding a motorbike in our group of friends. Now, I'm very happy. At school, I always had more boyfriends than girlfriends anyway, because I never found people that were like me. Actually, only when I managed to qualify for the GS Trophy and got out to a qualification out in South Africa, and I met 27 women from around the world that were like me. It was just such an amazing thing to have people that were happy to be in the mud, happy to be upside down, happy to have just achieved something or not achieved something. And that has made my mission within Sweet Lamb Ladies to bring people together to then have new friends. So Marisa's come along, and then from there she's met a collection of people, and then I now then get messages from people and they've gone off skiing together even, not even on a motorbike, but they've formed these solid friendships and they're like, well, okay, well, I'll come to the TRF group with you because we'll go together and then the two of us, it'll be good. And those friendships that are formed, I think, are so important. And I copied one of Fern has a brilliant thing that she has, which is starting to plot the ladies that are around the country. So I went very basic, and I've got a map of the UK. And every time anyone comes along to a festival, they put their spot on the map, and then anytime I have anybody else come along, I can say, oh, you're in that area, let me put you in contact with so and so and so and so. And these friendships are building, like-minded people going out, and it spreads from there.
As you know, I've made the most incredible friends through Sweet Lamb, through the ladies festivals, and we ride on track together, we ride on trail together, we're planning trips together. But I came all the way from Cambridgeshire to Wales for a training weekend, and I met a lady who rides off-road, and she lives in the next village. We had to come all the way to Wales to find that out. That says how much you're bringing everybody together, really. It's quite incredible.
Amazing that these networks happen. With the TRF Women campaign, it was never a purpose that we wanted any segregation. It was purely just to have a chat about issues that we were facing. It was somewhere to chat about gear that fits around our boobs and finding bikes that fit and riding gear that fits, because some women didn't want to talk about some of these issues in some of the main national groups or their local groups, and they wanted to share some advice that was women specific. So it was never meant to be divisive and like, we want our own rides and we want our own rides within our regional groups. I've never really been on any women's only rides within certain groups. It's given me some confidence now to say, I'm going to lead a beginner's ride, for example. And then some other women have seen that and said, oh, I'll come along. Some men have come along and said, oh, I quite fancy a slower pace of a ride, and they've enjoyed it. And it's also just giving that confidence and mentioning that you don't have to stay to the bitter end of a ride. If you're feeling tired or fatigued, you can peel off at midday, and it's fine to say that you don't have to stick it out to the bitter end.
One thing I've learned, and one thing that we're really trying to also convey in our group, is that there is no shame in letting somebody else ride your bike out of a tough spot that you've got yourself into, that you're not quite sure how to deal with at the skill level you're at or at the fitness level you're at. Or some days, I mean, a good friend of mine, he rides a lot and he rides lots of different bikes and on some quite technical lanes, but he got himself in a bit of a bother before Christmas because he went out when he had a cold, then got stuck and got really frustrated on this lane because there was this rock that he usually can get over, but he'd taken the wrong bike and it was just not happening. And at that point, to be able to say, do you know what, guys, can you just give me a hand? That is one thing we want to promote, but also within the TRF, I found it a very natural thing to be able to ask for that.
When I go out on a group ride, I can't even pick up a tool. People are like, can't help themselves to fix it for me. I'm like, okay, again, dropping my bike. We've always got a big burly chap on the end to the tail end Charlie so they can pick up the bikes. Almost reverse sexism, but I'm quite happy to let a big burly chap pick up my bike when I should be doing it really to build up my strength.
There are some advantages to being female sometimes, and chivalry works both ways. We had a fantastic weekend last year where there was an event of 80 riders and different groups, and it was mixed group, and you had the gung-ho guys, the advanced, and all the way through to kind of a beginners group. And actually what we found through the course of the weekend was that the beginners group, we had a steadier pace, we had so many giggles and so much fun, and actually there was a lot of the guys that actually wished they'd been in our group with the other guys that were with us, because the smiles, and there was no ego. And it actually changed it changed the dynamics. It worked really well.
I think changing the dynamic is a huge thing. We do an adventure weekend away at Sweet Lamb. Normally it's all guys, and I'm the rear end Charlie at the weekend, and we have our lead rider Rob, who's a fantastic guru on things, and it's a very fast pace and everything else. The guys have chosen me to be the rear end Charlie because it takes away all the ego. Okay, you've got a girl there and like, oh, you're making the sandwiches, love. No, I'm just going to hang around. And then they get up a gnarly bit and then they drop their bike and I sort of poodle up nice and gently and I just shout down, oh, I'll be back. I'll just park my bike up and then walk back down, pick their bike up, do their thing. And they suddenly realise that if you do this steadier pace with technique, it's so much easier than giving it the beans all the time, which is great fun. But most people, unless you're a really good regular rider, can't do 2 full days of 250 miles at that breakneck speed. You've got to pace it out.
It's the hare and the tortoise.
It is. But then the other thing that we find very much is within our groups, we have what we call the gentlemen that want the less aggressive side of training, and they want to understand the technique because they know as they're getting older, they haven't necessarily got the muscle that they had to muscle their way through. And we're getting more people specifically saying, well, can we have this type of very technical training at Sweet Lamb so we can get ourselves through rather than just blast?
So I'm sure there's going to be lots of these. What was your best ride or your best biking achievement?
For me, it's being able to, without using a huge amount of revs, a huge amount of aggression, a huge amount of everything, to just very controlly get up to the top of something that is just beautiful and amazing, be able to look at it, be able to see it, and then be able to get down something huge and, a loose down and a gnarly up, and just all those years of training and technique coming through. I was fortunate enough to be out trail riding today, and we're along a very slippy path west of Portugal, and it's sort of sheer muddy drop going down, but with the technique we can do it, and it's just so brilliant to be able to achieve things like that.
I'd second the thing with the technique, because I fell for this whole trail riding so hard that one of the things I really wanted to do was I wanted to do some international tours, and I didn't necessarily want to do it completely by myself. So I signed up after less than a year of real trail experience to this 10-day off-road trip to Morocco on our own bikes, and it was big bikes. I knew that I had 9 months to get myself fit, and I did a lot of training for. I was the youngest. I was the only female there. I was the only woman ever on that particular trip. So there was a bit of, you got to prove yourself first before it becomes accepted that this could actually work. I'm very proud of myself for making it all the way to Zagora and back again in that time. And I was not the one who lost their rag when things got tough. And it just goes to show that if you want something and you get yourself some help, that it doesn't matter that you might not be the strongest or you might not be the fittest, but actually a lot can be done with technique.
And I think as well, it's about, you don't have to be the fastest. The fastest often get themselves in trouble.
That's one of the reasons why I love trail riding. I've done the laps at the Nürburgring, I've done the track days, I've done the fast road riding, etc. But to be able to appreciate being out there and enjoying the outdoors because you're going steady, as well as that challenge of riding and technique, it's much more fulfilling. And cheesy grins.
I'm so privileged to have ridden some of the roads I've ridden before the age of 40, but having been stuck in bed for 3 years with some nasty illnesses, I'd say just make sure you go out and do these trips, even if you can just do 2 week snippets and get out to some of these exotic places if you can, or even into Europe. Go and ride and challenge yourself, because you just don't know what's around the corner. Obviously, my best biking achievement was the overland trip, but I just relive all these funny, silly moments in my head. I've really focused on navigation, but I want to pass that knowledge on over the next year, especially to women, because I think we do have a lot of imposter syndrome. People say, I can't do it, and I don't know where I'm going, and I'm not sure about going out by myself. If we don't pass on that skill to other people, not just in the technical skill of riding, but the learning how to create a ride out, learning how to get on the green road map and piece together a GPX, learning how to download a piece of the tech and say, I've got a weekend, let's get out to the Lake District or go and do Northumberland or hop on the Eurotunnel and go and do North France. I want my best biking achievement to be a bit of a legacy, really.
We're doing it while we can, because there will be a time when we won't be able to do it, and we won't be able to lift that heavy bike up. Make the changes, implement the things you want to do now.
I suppose I'm doing it a slightly different way. I mean, you ladies, you know how much my dream and aspiration is to do the kind of things and the kind of riding that you're doing. I need to build that technique up. I need to build that confidence up in order to be able to do it. I had aspirations of a certain trip this year, but realistically, I think that's probably one for next year. And for my level of confidence, I want to get my technique right. And then I've got a plan, like you said, Marina, for I will do that next year. So already I've got things in place this year to get me to that point.
One of the things that I've found so joyful about trail riding is that it's a micro adventure every time I go out, because the trail is never the same. I've ridden the same lanes around here to death. I know every stone on them, but depending on the day and the weather and the season and how I feel, it's always new and it's always different. And then somebody takes you on a lane that you've never been, and it goes into this dip and there's a little river and you come out the other side and you're like, that was so cool. It doesn't matter that you haven't been away.
I think COVID taught us that you don't have to go far to have an adventure. Some of the previous guests on the podcast are an absolute inspiration about not spending a huge amount of money. Like, you look at Rory on his bike and his trip across Europe. You look at Chloe Jones and her C90. You look at the chaps who bought the £600 bikes and did the trip. But you can find some really good bargains of kit, definitely not helmets, but on Vinted and Facebook Marketplace. A lot of my gear comes secondhand because women, we fluctuate in size. Some women get pregnant, some women gain or lose weight. Secondhand kit is always moving, and I fit into youth size motocross boots. So my Tech 7s are very, very cheap because young riders, their feet keep growing. So that's a benefit.
And I followed Fern's lead. You're the one who advised me about Vinted and where you'd found kit. I'm a real believer in what goes around comes around, and I'm now selling things on Vinted, and the sense of satisfaction that I know I'm passing a piece of kit that's been really well looked after onto somebody else, that they're going to get pleasure out of it. You even digitally, these are women that I've never met, but they're bagging a bargain, and it's great. It's a great feeling.
When you say kit that's really well looked after, I think we also have to caveat that when you go trail riding, your kit isn't always being well looked after. So I bought these amazing, like really beautiful Leah adventure pants last year at ABR, and they're white and I just love them. But they've never been white ever again. So, and they won't be because Wales and mud. The thing is, the gear isn't going to get any better, especially when you're learning. You're going to trash it. You're going to rip it. You might as well rip secondhand stuff that wasn't expensive, because it tends not to be any better after the trail ride than it was when you started.
We do a lot of our riding in Wales because it's an amazing place to ride, but Wales is very wet, so it's a lot of waterproofs. I rip through waterproof legs like anything because I jump on and off the bike as I go for gates, etc. So second-hand Army Gore-Tex is fantastic. You can buy it for 20 legs for £20. If I rip it and duct tape it, and then it looks like, and then Paul, my husband, turns around and goes, honey, you just look too trashy in that. Just get another pair of £20 trousers.
It's the unofficial TRF uniform anyway.
Worst ride or funniest story. I was trail riding in Sennybridge. I did drop my Army Gore-Tex and I was crouched down having a wee, and then I looked behind me. Out of the bracken appeared lots of eyes as I was mid-flow. And then I realised they were gherkins. Now, I lived in Nepal for a year. And I all turned around and I went, Namaste da. And I speak a bit of Nepali. And I think they were shocked, A, to see somebody in strange New Zealand Army DPMs. B, that they could see my Mafanwi up close and personal. C, that I'd compromised their position. And D, that I was speaking Nepali to them. And then E, I was panicking that I might have gone behind a red flag, and then I had to quickly pull my pants off and get back to my bike in case I was going to get shot at.
Mine was even still closer to home. It was one of the best rides and one of the most hilarious. Again, we were out in Thetford, Norfolk, doing the trails. The ruts got the better of me, and I never knew that brambles were so comfortable as a landing when you're coming off-road. So when all you could see was my feet sticking out the edge of this bramble bush that that swallowed me up. So everybody was dragging me out by my feet in fits of laughter, and we just carried on to Sunny Honey. But don't be scared of brambles or ferns.
Worst ride ever for me would be sideways winds with trucks sucking you in. Again, like Fern said, we always, whenever we go travelling, never ride at night, okay? It's always a given. But any trip we do, we always end up on one night just having to get somewhere. Something's all gone wrong and you end up riding at night. And this was 2022, and we were going down the desert highway down towards Western Sahara, and there's this wonderful open bit just before you get to Tantan, and it's beautiful desert tarmac right through the middle of the desert, but the wind comes across, and because it's going down to all of the ports, etc., there are a lot of lorries, and as the wind comes along, you're overtaking the lorries, but as you overtake them, the wind suddenly dies when you're next to them, and then as you overtake them, you sort of get this funny vortex. It sucks you in and it sucks you out again as you're hurtling along at 75 miles an hour. Is way fast enough at night on roads like that. So we had about 80 miles of this. We got into Tantan, and I was just like, almost I was crying in my helmet. It's like, no, I'm talking myself through and everything else. Got to Tantan, found the place we were staying that night. I actually dropped the bike in the middle of the high street because I was just like a quivering wreck. Non-alcoholic country, really, but we always carry a little tot of whiskey. So that evening, the tot of whiskey came out because I was so shaky.
My worst one was kind of also my best one. It's one of those weird things where being on a really good trip and it gets to nightfall because we got delayed. We were making our way down to Mazuga on said Morocco trip, and it was getting dark on us again, which has been fine. That was the third time it got dark on us, so we were kind of used to it by then. But we were on this piste going down the Algerian border, and I'm sure it would have been absolutely fine had it still been light out. But because it was dark, all the Moroccan border force could see were 12 headlights in the dark, making their way along this really quite touchy border. So we got pulled over by the Moroccan border force in the middle of the night. And I'm the only one who speaks any French. And here I am with my high school, tourist French, trying to explain to these guys that we are tourists. We're not trying to be here. We just got a little bit, not even lost, but that no, we're not allowed to go down that route. Passports, please. You need to follow us out of here. And we'd only at that, I think it was 9 o'clock when they pulled us over. It then took an hour and a half for the formalities to be done and for them to kind of radio us in. And I think we only had about 15 clicks left to do at that point, but they diverted us by 30 clicks. And come past 10 p.m, we ended up on this route that we weren't supposed to be on, in a riverbed with deep sand at night. None of us had ridden sand in anger before, and we're kind of knackered, out of water. And this is either we're going to get ourselves out of this now or we're spending the night. That's when you learn that a 200-kilo adventure bike in the sand, there's really only one thing that's going to do it, and that's pin it and pray. It was 2 a.m. by the time we made it into camp. So that was a 14-hour riding day. One of our chaps tracked it on his GPS. I think the average speed was 29 miles an hour on that day. And we'd done a whole day where the first half was Piste de Jaffa, which was just fast. And then we get into this riverbed. It was the day when everybody said we would never do that again. And it's the day everybody still remembers most fondly because we pulled each other out of that shit and we all made it through.
I personally believe that good training equips you so brilliantly to be able to get out there and do the adventure. Even if the adventure is only going to Tesco's, being able to turn your bike around in the car park without dropping it and without coming out in a full sweat because you've been panicking, or doing a riverbed going across somewhere on a top of a mountain. if we put in good training, we'll be able to achieve those things so much easily. With the Sweet Lamb ladies, I've taken all of those techniques that I've been able to absorb. I call it the Mole Yan Lu method. So Mole for Mark Molyneux, who's a brilliant trainer who took me through to my GS Trophy thing from Sweet Lamb. And then Yan is Jan Deloitte, who's a great trainer out in South Africa I've spent some time with. And the Lou is Louise. It's like, that's my way of training. So what we can do then is we've then transferred that out into a training method for ladies. Ladies learn differently. They learn with a lot more words. I mean, we've had a lot more words on our podcast this evening, a lot more chitter-chatter, a lot more everything. But what they want to do is learn the technique. And if you can explain to someone that actually, if you want to go around the corner, you've got to lean the bike, you've got to counterbalance it, you've got to put your weight over into certain positions, then they'll trust that that's the mechanics or the physics of it. Then they'll go and do it, and then they'll achieve it. And it's those little things of achieving just that tighter corner, and it becomes easier, and then practice, and then also building onto things. So I know, Marisa, when you've come to our training, we will give you 5 fundamental things. When you come first time, you might only get 2 of those, but the rest of the 3 are lurking in there, and then suddenly you'll go around a corner and you're like, oh, that's what outer weight is, and it'll all fall together.
I'm a massive fan of Sweet Lamb and Sweet Lamb ladies, so thank you. I need to understand the technique in order to work out where I'm going next, and to start with the festival and the basic training of drills again and again and again, really got those fundamental basics, the solid foundations in my repertoire, to then progress on to the next level and that very specific weekend training. I've done that twice now. And because I've done that same level of training with you twice, it really clicked the second time. And riding round the Clairwen Reservoir, as you know, was just incredible. So I was able to benchmark myself on the second time I did it, the first time, before then progressing to the next level. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to building on that again this year.
Just being able to do it more easily for me is almost where it's at. I've done horse riding before. I've done a lot of skiing in my life, and what you learn when you do the more sort of technical things is that you can either brute force it or you can do it properly and well, and then you'll save energy and you'll actually be able to do it not necessarily for longer, but you'll be able to do it properly for longer. At some point it'll obviously always fail. I've chosen to be on a big bike. I knew I wasn't going to be as strong as some of the chaps that I'm out with. It was absolutely phenomenal to me how much somebody looking at you and going, if your leg was just that little bit straighter and you held your weight more over the foot peg, you'd be able to keep that standing posture for much longer. What difference that makes to your endurance, or how much safer you are going around a corner at some speed if you're putting your weight in the right place, or how much easier you can climb some technical stuff if your balance is right and your stance is right and you understand braking and you understand all these fundamentals that training teaches you, and then put it into practice a lot, because we've got a lot of ride outs in South Wales and we've got a lot of trails. Every time I go, somebody just looks at you with that knowledge and that understanding, and they pick up a little thing, and that little thing makes all the difference.
The key for me is we don't want 2 feet on the ground, one solid foot. We want to be flamingos. We're out there, one solid foot. A lot of women have great clutch control, and you don't need to wham it on the throttle all the time. You've got to get that lovely balance. And like you say, it's just being able to go through and fine point these things and pick up on everybody's different quirks, and everybody's going to ride differently, but we can sort of help focus it. There are some fantastic training schools out there. We're not the only one in the world, but it's about quality training of people that aren't going to just say, yeah, no, just go it, just do it, give it some, it'll be all right. Because as soon as you hear give it some, it'll be all right, to me, that's not the place to be. It's about how does it work for you?
Arguably for me, it was the better investment to say I'm going to spend a significant amount, because, you know, good training is not cheap, but I'd rather spend it on that than a £500 helmet, because I'll get more out of it.
In regards to navigation, it's definitely worth taking some time to understand how to use a preferred gadget, whether that be a phone or a Garmin or whatever device, mainly from a safety point of view. If you take the time to learn how to organise and create a route, or just understand the principles of looking at the terrain around you, you're going to enjoy yourself a lot more, and it's going to open up so much more riding to you. My friend Rachel and I run navigation courses, and we're trying to open them up to TRF women groups across the country this year. You can get a huge understanding of terrain, not only by looking at an Ordnance Survey map and seeing how close the contours are, but it takes time. A lot of the older gadgets were quite Fisher-Price. You have to take the time to learn how to use them. So that might be on a dog walk or using it in the car on the way to work. There's a lot to learn, but it's really going to improve your riding and understanding the riding. And if it's not something you understand, you don't have to learn it all at once. But if you go on a ride out, you could say, could you just explain some of this to me?
I mean, I've been lucky enough to join you, Fern, and Rachel with your navigation. I've got a lot to learn. And I've got a lot to practice. And to your point, that takes time. And the more I do that and the more I get out there and do, the further afield I'm going to be able to go. Building blocks, isn't it? And it does take time and practice and trial and error.
What do you use, Marina, for navigation?
I use the rest of the TRF. I've started getting into GPXs a little bit. I'm not at the stage where I'm plotting my own routes, mostly because where we are, just looking at the GRM, the Green Road map, you can't always tell whether that's a really spicy lane or a reasonable lane. And because I'm on a big bike, I don't go out my own anyway, so I'm always with a group. And I have graduated from duckling in the middle to tail end Charlie occasionally. I can no longer bat my eyelashes when my bike falls over, because I now have to pick it up myself and probably help other people pick up theirs. We're using Outdoor Active a lot around here, and various of the freely available phone apps. I think there's a lot of people navigating off their phones.
I use Zumo XT, but as my backup is my phone. And I've got an extra mount that sits on there, and it works. But 4 years ago, I wasn't navigating. I was just following wherever Paul went. Paul goes in the most ridiculous routes sometimes. So it's like, no, I need to be a bit more in charge. So now with the TET, with the GRM, with ACT, you can find something, and then you can, during the day, I can remap and re-GPX it through, and we can go from there. Once you get into it, again, it opens up this huge window.
It's nice to know where you're at, because I'm not Welsh. It's amazing how quickly you get to a point where you've turned left into this lane, you're up on the side of this mountain, and you have no idea where in the world you're at. You get turned around so quickly. Fern is absolutely right. There might be a point where you're the only one who can get out to get help, because you don't always have reception in Wales. So it's good to know roughly where you are in the world.
So I'm going to ask, what are your aspirations over the next week, year, or 5 years, or however long?
I had a quote for main dealer service in the autumn that was a little bit outside of what I wanted to pay, seeing as I've now officially exited my warranty period. We've done part of the service, but I've still got a box of bits in the garage that need putting on, including chains and sprockets, brake parts and things like that. So once it gets maybe a little bit warmer in the garage, sorting that out. I also think probably down to about 3 mil of tread on my rear tyre. Last time I was out on the trails, I was sideways everywhere, up the hill and then down again. It was very funny for everyone involved, just not me. So that's my next week bit. We've not really made many bike related plans this year, but what I really want to try and do is I want to do some kind of solo trip for a week, kind of just getting myself out there, and we've done camping off the bike and all of these little bits separately, but I've never done it by myself, so I think that would be a fun thing too.
This year my ambition is to really hone my learning and practicing my navigation. So I've got all my apps on the phone, I've got my holder now, so I want to go out and explore that. I've also got the KTM. I've not actually ridden it yet. I want to learn more about the suspension and, how that's going to handle differently. Really kind of play around locally under my own devices and really take all that learning that I've done and get out there and practice so that next year I can do more of the bigger aspirational trips and head overseas to maybe Portugal, Spain, Morocco, or maybe further afield.
So for me, my aspiration is really with the Sweet Lamb Ladies and where we're taking this wonderful collection of now 300 ladies that we've got on board and just opening their eyes to what they are capable of, showing ladies that they can believe in themselves and they can get there and they can go on these further trips, etc. And if they need hand holding part of the way, then we'll hand hold them. We'll do what we're doing with our collaborative trips and take them there. But then also then go off and do it yourself. Go out there, like you say, for yourself, to be able to get a handle on that navigation. Fantastic. So getting more people out there. And also we do a lot of couples and a lot of couples training, and it's then with those couples enabling people to work together as a team. Someone's going to be good at this, someone's going to be good at that, and sending people out and exploring the sorts of things and seeing the sorts of things around the world that are just phenomenal.
My aim's really to get riding fit. I'm going to have to put in a bit of gym work and physio to get my body back into shape, but the last few times I've had to do it is basically getting hours back on the bike, which is the best way, really. It definitely prevents parked motorbike syndrome, PMS. Just get back out to doing what I love best. I'd like to print out a map of the UK and the national parks and just spend some time in the places I haven't really done. So the North York Moors, Northumberland, and the gap between the Lake District and North York Moors. I've done a fair bit of North Wales, but I haven't done South Wales, and a bit more of Tet. I got into North France last year. It was nice to use my passport again. So just more of that, really. And my poor little DRZ donkey really needs the suspension doing. I would like to run a ladies' weekend in East Anglia. That's on my to-do list as well. So a bit more networking for ladies.
I think an aspiration for me as well is to be able to have it on the map, join up all of the TET in the UK and actually say, yes, I've ridden around the UK. My dad walked around the UK with his buddies and they'd do 2 weeks and they'd stop at that pub and then 6 months later they'd go back to the next pub and walk along the coastal path. And I think if I can do that along the TET, we've done quite a bit going south through Europe and it's just joining it up. And I think maybe my mission is to get that map, like Fern said, and actually go, okay, well, what gaps haven't we done? And then specifically go and do that little bit and have that ambition to say, yep, done that.
I'm surprised we didn't get into shiwis and boobs in armour and things like that.
There is just nothing sexy about wearing all the protective gear in the summer where I'm wearing my Nox and my Moto Girl leggings and then my motocross boots. Yes, I look like 10% sexy. It's just so hard.
We are not going to look sexy riding off-road motorbikes.
Even the likes of Vanessa Ruck, when she's doing her Africa eco race, when she's got all the braces and everything, the stuff that she wears is a men's cut. At a second glance, you'd still struggle to see that there's a skinny lady underneath.
Well, she looks lovely.
I get really frustrated with road gear because road gear is mostly designed for either racing, which I don't wear leathers, or touring, where everybody wants to be boring. So it's all really dull colours and the helmets are all really dull colours. So I got really excited when I bought this Enduro style helmet, which was super funky colours and everything. And I'm like, this is going to be so cool. I'm going to be doing selfies now and I'm going to be on Instagram and it's going to look lush. And then you take the helmet off and then you realise that you've got red puffy eyes from the wind. You've got this massive dent on your cheeks from where the pads push in.
A ring of dust.
Dirt stash.
Makeup smudged.
Your hair is, I'm styling it adventure hair now because it's never going to be good anyway. And you're like, clean girl aesthetic is just not going to happen if you're riding trails for real.
A massive thank you to Fern, Louise, Marisa and Marina for doing that. Normal service will be resumed next week, but if you do know any women that are interested in getting into trail riding, please point them in the direction of this podcast and the women's section of the TRF. All right, that's it. See you next week. Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.